Thought I would do this quick video to show you what I do when scanning in my negatives. I use Silverfast SE on my Windows laptop with my V600 Epson scanner. So the workflow for medium format is exactly the same as 35mm, but you need to tinker a little bit more in Lightroom on the 35mm negs. So this is the this one here, the seafront. So this was Portra 400 shot at ISO 200 in camera. It's Pentax 6.7. I do have a light meter on the 6.7, but it doesn't work, or it's really temperamental. So I either use an Android app, I think it's called Light Meter, or the Doomy meter, that Chinese light meter that I bought for my Leica M4. Surprisingly, the Android app and the Doomer light meter is exactly the same. So the light readings on these light meters on smartphones are really good. In this instance, for this seafront office, I had it just pointed at that quad bike, and it worked. So the workflow that I do is I get the red bounding box on the negative and I pull it in so there's no black selected, and so I get a true reading on the colour profile. Next I got to the top box here. I always select 48 to 24 bit. I don't use that HDR raw. I don't know why, it's just something that I've never progressed to. I stick with that. Second part is I always scan it at 3200 ppi. This will produce a scanned image of around 100. This says 175, but it's between 90 and 145 normally. And then if I'm in Lightroom, I'll export as a JPEG. So I get the source scan as high as I can. Some people, I think, say not to go higher than 2400. I just keep it at 3200. So that's there. Next part is the Negafix. This is the part of Silverfast that I think is personally better than Negative Lab Pro. Whilst the vendor types are quite small, I think the colour rendition is really nice. So for example, on this one, I would pick Kodak Portrait, and I'll just stick at the 400, the standard one. I don't use NC or VC. This next bit, so the first part, I push tolerance to 85. Just type it into the box there. 85. I used to originally put it in at 70. I've just crept up 70, 75, 80. 85 seems to be the sweet spot that I like, so it's something that I use. And then this exposure, this varies from medium format to 35mm, but the starting point I always put it in as 1. So that will give you the impression that it's blown out, but that's how I leave it. Sometimes I'll push it higher than that. So what will decide if it's 1 or 1.5 or 2 would be the highlights, and that to me is okay. Next part, I would hit auto. Okay, so that's the actual scan there. I must say these Portrait 400 colours are just another level. They're just absolutely beautiful, and I think whilst the actual film stock is really quite expensive, especially in the UK, it's worth it because the tinkering on the colour is so much more reduced. Right, so the next part is the histogram. So you should have the histogram here. If it's not, you can click the button at the top. So I pull the blacks. If it's either touching that, I sometimes bring it in a little bit. The whites, I want that on the end there, so it's normally 255 or just on the far right hand side. The one that I do move is this middle one. If you've got a curve with a shape like that, I'd normally move the middle marker three quarters of the way between the left and the right marker. So it's starting there. Once I've hit auto, I push it to about there. Right, that does seem blown out, granted, but if you trust me and just leave it, you'll see in a moment. Next, unsharp mask. I do not do sharpening in Silverfast. I've read so many vlogs and watch videos, it says that it's better to do it in Lightroom, and I'll show you how I do that in Lightroom in a moment. So I untick that. This grain and noise elimination, this I find sort of works getting the right profile of the grain in the background of the image. So I always select it on medium gain from the drop down menu, and then I would select 1:1, and it will work its magic. It will just run a quick scan over the neg. Okay, so that's that will work its magic. This last particular stage, it's not necessarily needed. I'm just showing you for illustration purposes. You can just leave that as is without clicking on the 1:1 and it running that pass. You can just scan it. But that is how it looks in Silverfast. Okay, so here's the image in Lightroom. It's come across, so it's not as blown out as it was in Silverfast. So this has had no edits. So there's no science to this. This is just quickly automatic. So I'd love to say I'll do some really technical stuff, but I don't. So with Portrait 400, when the outputted scan from Silverfast, I find 9 times out of 10, color cast is perfect. The first thing I would do would be go up and hit auto white balance. You can see a little bit of difference. Sometimes I keep it, sometimes I don't. That tends to put a little, I think that looked a little bit green, so I might just boost the greens up to the magenta side. It's really simple. The next minute, this is the real technical bit, you hit this auto button, pop. So at the top, I have the, I've got the clipping, the shadow and highlights clipping. You can see that the blue here is on the image to say that it's clipped the shadows. Wouldn't necessarily bother me, so I would leave that. If, for example, I feel that there'd need to be a little bit of movement, and that original outputted scan was too overexposed, I would just shift this highlighter to the left, but I don't need to do that. I think it looks quite perfect there. Alternatively, if I want to boost it to give it that real pastel color, I would either push shadows to the right, which I've done there a little bit, and actually I think that looks a little bit better, or I would push exposure to the right. Okay, next, tone curve, and I'm going through this manual. I've actually got 2 or 3 presets here to the left that I would just click, so I can do it really quite quickly. I would normally do a medium contrast. Sometimes I do strong, but inevitably I would do medium. Next, detail. This is where you correct the sharpness. I don't know where I've seen this. There was one video saying that you've got a little bit more bandwidth to push the sharpening on an image in Lightroom, and this is the workflow that I do. So the first thing I do is on a medium format negative, push that to say 65. Gone as high as 85. Sometimes I think that's a little bit crunchy. And then the masking with the Alt key held down, if you drag the masking so you get the black and the white. So I'm teaching you how to suck a bald egg here, but the white is the bit that's going to be sharpened, the black is the bit that's going to be ignored. So I would sort of push that to around 50. I just want real subtle sharpening on it, and that's it. Looking at the sign, it might be a little bit too sharp, so I'll probably drop that down from 65 down to 55. That's it. That is the scan. So that's the medium format one done.